He once said, teams don't pay him to tackle. Deion Sanders was a 2-time Super Bowl champion, Defensive Player of the Year, and the first true shut-down corner. But how does a player accused of avoiding contact become the greatest cornerback ever? Well, to understand that, you need to see the part of his game that didn't show up on the stat sheet. Sanders never led the league in interceptions, and his career total is middle of the pack amongst Hall of Fame defensive backs. But that's because he was so good in coverage, teams just avoided his side of the field.
That was rule number 1 against Deion. Throw to somebody else. Don't let him touch the ball, and don't kick it to him. Get beat by somebody else. Don't get beat by Deion Sanders.
But even though teams threw in his direction less, he still made plays. As Sanders once said, if I don't let them get open, I won't get any work.
Jerry Rice gets a step on him, raises his hand, but there's no one with better catch-up speed in all of football than number 21.
Sanders was able to do this so well due to his sub 4.3, sub 4.2 depending on who you ask, 40-yard time. He also used that speed to become one of the greatest return men ever. And that speed had been obvious long before he reached the NFL.
When did you realize you were different? How old were you when you realized that I'm not like these other 10-year-olds or these other 8-year-olds or these other 13?
I think when I came out the womb like this.
He rode that talent to Florida State University, and by his senior year in college, he was the nation's best defensive back. But Sanders didn't rely on talent alone.
You're not just playing Deion, the physical player. You're not just playing Deion, the quick cornerback. You're playing the cerebral guy that thinks the game through, that understands the game. I think Deion Sanders is the greatest athlete I've ever been around. You rarely see a guy this gifted work this hard.
Sanders was a 2-time All-American with 14 career interceptions, and his stock was soaring heading into the 1989 draft. He'd be selected 5th overall by the Atlanta Falcons. But while in college, he had noticed a problem.
DBs was one of the worst paid positions next to, I believe, the offensive lineman at that time. And it blew my mind. I remember dropping that list and sat down and I said, oh no. Right then I said, prime time.
Sanders remembered a promise he made to his mother when he was just a kid.
I said, I'm gonna be rich one day. Mom, I'm gonna make a lot of money. And you will never have to work another day of your life.
So Sanders created this alter ego, Primetime, which had been in the works long before he was drafted. During a 59-0 blowout at South Carolina, Sanders told the fans they should ask for their money back. Waiting for a punt, he shouted to the Clemson bench, "This one's going back." He returned it 76 yards for a touchdown. In his senior year, he emerged from a white stretch limousine in a tuxedo for a game against the rival University of Florida. Sanders was flashy, he had swagger, and he was arrogant. But in college, he backed up the talking. He believed he could do the same in the NFL. However, the Falcons were offering him $400,000. He could not retire his mum with that. So he demanded $11 million. It was an outrageous demand, but even in a market where corners weren't paid much, Sanders still had leverage. That leverage came from baseball. He was drafted by the Yankees in 1988, and by 1989, he was called up to the majors. So while his contract dispute with Atlanta dragged on, Sanders simply went to work in New York. On September 5th, he even hit a home run for the Yankees. Suddenly, the question flipped. Was he about to become another Bo Jackson, choosing baseball over the NFL? Well, if anything, Sanders was leaning the other way. I've always said that I love football and that baseball is my girlfriend. And the day after that home run, he proved it, signing a deal with the Atlanta Falcons worth more than $4 million. 4 days later, he was playing in his first NFL game. Breaking 2 tackles and slipping past several other defenders, he returned a punt 68 yards to the end zone. That made him the only player to hit a home run in the majors and score a touchdown in the NFL in the same week. And throughout his career, Sanders kept stacking firsts. But football was where he believed he truly belonged. Even so, living up to the primetime hype was tough on a Falcons team that went 3-13 his rookie year and 5-11 the next season. Fortunately, by 1991, things finally clicked. Jerry Glanville, the architect of the Falcons' dominant grit splits defense of the 70s, was now in his second year as head coach. But the 1991 Falcons were not a defensive team. Instead, with the league's 5th best offense, they built a system predicated on the deep ball.
We didn't have any West Coast long handoff. I'd rather take a stick in the eye than watch Bill Walsh's offense.
A 2-3 start, however, left most thinking this was the same old Falcons. And it looked like it would only get worse as the 49ers were waiting for them in Week 7. The marquee matchup this game was Deion Sanders vs Jerry Rice. It was their 5th of 10 eventual matchups. And if you want to be the greatest, you have to beat the greatest. So Sanders leaned on his obsessive preparation, something even more important when facing Jerry Rice.
I knew everything about my opponent, his likes, his dislikes, and I studied coordinators, not just players.
Yeah.
Coordinators stay,
Yeah.
players change, and coordinators just use the guys like checkers. So I studied those guys. Now you couple that with talent and a work ethic, and you're here.
Yeah.
Sanders' best performance against Rice would come later, in 1993, where he had 2 interceptions, including one on a pass intended for Rice, and another to seal a 27-24 win. But today, in Week 7, Rice had the upper hand. Still, Sanders answered back with a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown, helping the Falcons pull off a 39-34 upset. However, many considered this a one-off performance. This is the Falcons, a team who hadn't had a winning season since 1982. But 3 weeks later, they'd get their answer in a rematch. This game, however, turned out to be a slugfest. The 49ers led just 7-0 entering the 4th quarter. While Rice had won the battle in Week 7, in the rematch, Sanders shut him down. Rice had 6 catches for 44 yards, meanwhile Sanders had 2 pass breakups and an interception. A short strike to Andre Rison early in the 4th tied the game, but the 49ers responded, and with just 9 seconds left, they held on to a 4-point lead. The Falcons did have one last attempt, at the 49ers' 44-yard line, and on the final play, they completed a Hail Mary. They had just swept the 49ers. It wasn't a fluke. By now, the entire city had embraced the spirit of the 1991 Falcons.
They're not the best team in football yet, but they are the most exciting. Because in 1991, they were too legit. Well, you tell them, Hammer.
Sanders had given a long-struggling franchise a swagger it hadn't felt in years. He, along with teammate Kim Micaiah, both finished with 6 interceptions, first in the NFC. With the momentum from the 49ers game, they won 5 of the remaining 7 games and reached the playoffs for the first time in almost a decade to face the New Orleans Saints. The Saints entered as 6-point favourites, armed with the league's best defense and an explosive offense to match. And they started like it, already up by 7 and threatening to go ahead by 2 touchdowns late in the first quarter, as they faced 3rd and 3 near the goal line. Instead, Sanders came up with the interception in the Falcons' end zone.
That's what turned the whole attitude of our defense around. We were feeling a little down, and it was a little hard trying to stop this offense to, okay, here we go.
The Falcons took control, and from there, came back to win 27-20. The Redskins awaited them in the divisional round, a team who had already blown them out in Week 11. Conditions at RFK Stadium were wet and slippery, and the Falcons did everything possible to sabotage themselves, turning the ball over 6 times. Washington went on to win the Super Bowl. Atlanta went in the opposite direction, finishing with a losing record in 1992 and 1993. Meanwhile, by 1994, Sanders was the NFL's best corner, a 3-time Pro Bowler and 3-time All-Pro. But he wasn't a winner. Now he was about to hit free agency, and several teams immediately began courting him. While the 1980s belonged to the San Francisco 49ers, by the early 90s, the Cowboys had stolen the crown. They had beaten the 49ers in consecutive championship games, going on to win the Super Bowl both times. So in 1994, the Cowboys hoped to be the first team to win 3 straight Super Bowls. The 49ers, however, were determined to not allow that to happen.
After the final play of the game, Eddie and I got in the elevator, just the 2 of us. And he looked over at me and said, "We can't let this happen again." And Eddie said, "I don't care what it costs. I don't care about anything. We're not going to lose to Dallas in the NFC Championship this year."
The 49ers' biggest move was signing Sanders to a 1-year deal. He was a big moment player, but in Atlanta, there weren't many big moments to shine in. With the 49ers, on the other hand, there were plenty, starting in Week 4 against the Saints. The 49ers were up 17-13 late in the 4th, but the Saints were driving, now at the Niners' 42-yard line. Jim Everett threw in the direction of his top receiver, Michael Haynes. Everett connected with Sanders, who returned the interception for a 74-yard touchdown. The 49ers won 24-13. Their Week 7 matchup would be an even bigger moment as Sanders returned to Atlanta. In what would be a blowout win, Sanders made the play of the game, intercepting a pass and returning it 93 yards for a touchdown, high-stepping and taunting his former teammates as he crossed the goal line. As he would proclaim after the game,
"I got one thing to say, this is my house. I built this and this is my house."
Those two performances were part of Sanders' finest season to that point. He finished the year with 6 interceptions, returning 3 for touchdowns, and was named Defensive Player of the Year. He had this season with teams actively avoiding his side of the field.
Chicago made the decision to completely ignore the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. Deion was a non-factor statistically, but a huge factor tactically.
While the individual accomplishments were nice, Sanders joined the 49ers to win. And that goal would be tested in their 3rd straight championship game against the Cowboys. The 49ers started hot. Before the Cowboys could even look up at the scoreboard, the 49ers had forced 3 turnovers and jumped out to a 21-0 lead. While they would fight back, the 49ers were still up 31-14 at halftime. Dallas was able to remain in this game, in large part thanks to Michael Irvin, who finished with almost 200 receiving yards. But when Sanders was covering him, he was a non-factor. The 49ers had maintained their lead late into the 4th, but now, with less than 7 minutes left, the Cowboys hoped to bring the score within 3. Sanders was lined up against Michael Irvin. Aikman took the snap, floated the ball his direction, but Irvin could not make the catch. He argued it was pass interference. I'll let you decide that. However, the Cowboys wouldn't score again, and the 49ers won 38-28. Sanders really was the final piece they needed to beat the Cowboys. And once they did, the Super Bowl felt almost effortless, because the NFC Championship game had already felt like the real Super Bowl.
The Super Bowl wasn't for 2 more weeks, but we all knew this was the main event.
The 49ers blasted the Chargers 49-26, and Sanders got in on the action with an interception early in the 4th. But with the season over, his contract was up, and another team was ready to make a move.
In Jerry's mind, I think he felt that the only way we get back to the Super Bowl is that we take Deion Sanders away from San Francisco and put him on our team.
There is no star on that team any larger, as they say down in Texas, larger than life, than Neon Deion Sanders. The grand entrance made today at Texas Stadium. Sanders with his family after signing a 5-year, $35 million deal with an almost $13 million signing bonus.
But Dallas had to start the season without their new star. A knee injury and surgery kept Sanders out until Week 9. He would return just in time for the Cowboys' ultimate test in Week 11, the San Francisco 49ers. But despite how important this game was to the Cowboys, they were not prepared.
We thought we'd line Deion up on Jerry and the other corner go opposite the whole game, but they didn't do that. They moved Jerry around. They got him on linebackers. They created matchups of what they wanted to see there, and we really wasn't prepared for that, and it was hard to adjust.
What resulted was a devastating blowout loss, and that was with the 49ers starting their backup quarterback. The man who they signed to beat the 49ers was not able to save the Cowboys. They still finished 12-4, but San Francisco remained the team they had to overcome. Fortunately for them, the Packers would defeat the 49ers in the divisional round. With their rival suddenly out of the way, the Cowboys had a clear path and they beelined straight to the Super Bowl. This would be Sanders' only season, from 1991 to 1999, without a Pro Bowl or All-Pro selection, and his lowest interception total so far. But remember, he missed half the season, and by this point in his career, teams were barely throwing in his direction. Even so, the signing paid off, as the Cowboys went on to win their 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. Sanders kept dominating, earning 4 straight Pro Bowl and All-Pro selections, and even playing corner and receiver for most of his snaps in 1996. After that run came a brief stop with the Redskins, a short retirement, and then a final stint with the Ravens, before he officially retired in 2005. Deion Sanders was the greatest corner to ever play. He could easily cover the opponent's best receiver with no help, and the fact he was able to have such an illustrious football career while also playing baseball, and therefore missing training camps, OTAs, and preseason games, is incredible. For example, in 1992, despite missing several games, he led the NFC in Pro Bowl votes, And in 1993, he didn't play until week 7, yet he still led the NFC with 7 interceptions in 11 games. But as Deion has said, there wouldn't be a Deion Sanders without Bo Jackson. The two-sport path he walked, while Bo Jackson walked it first. And no athlete has ever done it with more raw power or more ease. If you want to understand the blueprint that made Prime possible, you can watch this video on Bo Jackson next.